Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sitting In podcast. Today, we are sitting down with Alexey Vermeulen. Is that how you say it?
Vermeulen.
Vermeulen. All right. Pretty close.
That's pretty good.
All right. Alexey is currently a gravel professional cyclist, I guess would be the best way to put it. Previously, mountain bike pro cyclist.
More road rider. But
More road rider. All right. Yeah. And then you were BMC Devo at the World Tour level for a while, correct?
BMC Devo and then Jumbo Visma.
Oh, Jumbo Visma.
Lotto NL Jumbo at the time.
Dude, the Wikipedia page didn't tell me that.
Should tell whoever does that to fix it.
Isn't it a community collab?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
I always love to see what shows up on Wikipedia pages.
All right, well, I guess you're the better person to give the elevator speech here then. So how would you introduce yourself to people if I was like, yo, you got 10 seconds. Give me the rundown.
It can be more than 10 seconds.
Yeah, it can be as long as you want.
No. I grew up as the oldest of three boys, and all very focused on sports, very competitive. And I think from like 14 to 24, I was very focused on road cycling, watching the tour and just growing up, aspiring to race my bike in the Tour de France. And literally from like making it to the world tour, I realized like maybe this isn't exactly what I wanted to do. And at the same time, this growth of endurance racing in the US was happening, and jump ship, COVID happened, and now I'm known for riding my bike with my dog.
Right on. Tell us a little bit more about Willie.
Willie is a 12-pound miniature dachshund who rides in a backpack, pretty much refuses to walk at this point. And I would say I ride with him 4 or 5 times a week. Right on. And he probably trains more than most normal cyclists.
He spends more on bike time than a lot of people.
Yeah, he's learned how to get aero. He knows what's up.
All right.
He gets snacks over the shoulder, drinks over the left shoulder. He knows how to do it.
How's his nutrition plan? Pretty good. He's got a dial at this point.
A lot of carbs.
Yeah.
Spring gels, awesome sauce. I got to make sure I don't bring things with chocolate. I literally pick my ride food based on what my dog can eat.
Oh, you got to be careful, right? No chocolate in their Rice Krispies or anything like that.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that. So you said road cycling was was that the first intro to sport that you had, or was it other things along the way? You said you were the oldest of 3 boys?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oldest, so the best by far.
I agree.
I played everything. I pretty much sucked at ball sports, but everything else was like my thing. I'm dual citizen, so I'm half Canadian. And so hockey was a big part of growing up. I lived on a lake, grew up in Michigan. And so we all played hockey from as young as I can remember till high school. Played soccer for a bit, ran cross country, track. But cycling just took me places. It eventually is just like what drew my, not even passion for the sport, but just like interest and curiosity about the rest of the world beyond Michigan or the country. And so I feel like as I kind of realized like, oh, I might be good at this, it was also this kind of pull toward, I can just see other places my friends can't see. And then from there, it just kind of kept tumbling where I had contract options and got to decide or defer school. And then, shit gets serious and all of a sudden you didn't go to school, you don't have a college degree, you got to figure out what you're doing with your life and decide you have to be fast enough to make money.
What was like that moment where you were like, oh, like this is going somewhere? Did you have like a traditional, like you were like, oh, I was a 5 and then I was a 4 and then I was a 3 and then I was a 2 and a 1.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Not really. I think there's a couple moments that stick out to me. I won junior nationals, which just kind of took the burden off my parents, and the national team started paying. In the Lance Armstrong years, CS Cycling had a lot of money and threw it around for, especially for juniors and under 23s that were coming up. And so from there, I got to go race in Europe, which just the style of racing fit me. It's kind of all in or all out. And then got to race world championships that year in Copenhagen. And I think that just grew everything where the guys that you were watching on TV were racing the same course as you. I was watching Cancellara and Cavendish battled up the final climb. And so I think that was the first moment. And then from there, it was that moment of like, okay, am I going to go to school for riding? Am I going to go to school without the bike? Am I going to just ride my bike? And then beyond that, it was that World Tour contract that kind of really sealed the deal. Because I had told my parents I'd give myself my under 23 career and defer school that whole time. So I applied to school out of high school, deferred for 4 years or until I signed that World Tour contract. And that was like okay, what do I do now? Moment.
What do you think you would have studied?
I've never gone back and do it, but I wanted to go into medicine of some kind. I've always been very interested in more human nature, psychological stuff, but I wanted to go pre-med. That's
That's a lot of studying.
yeah. That's why it will never happen
Were
again.
you a good student?
I always loved studying. School was, I found my ways out.
Yeah.
I like sport more than school.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, the competitive nature for me is always the same. Like, I would hate to get a test back and it would be worse than my friends. Like, I'm just the most competitive person.
Okay.
And I think part of that's like ego, and part of it's just that desire and that need to like constantly try and be the best version of yourself, which is something I was talking to my friend's dad the other day. I was talking to my friend the other day and about his kid, and I was like, you can't really teach, like, at 14, you either want it or you don't. Everyone talks about these sacrifices they made, and I was like, at 14, they don't feel like sacrifices. You just know what you want. And you get lucky a couple times, and then all of a sudden, you have options in front of you, and it goes from there. But yeah.
What do you think your lucky moments were? Can you pinpoint them, or?
I think winning nationals, like USA as a cycling nation, it's such a funnel, and so I had to get into that pipeline quick, and so I think winning nationals at 15 years old or 16 years old was a big deal. From there, I think it's just the way I raced in Europe. Like, it just fit well. And I think there's like little results that I know, like there's this race called Val d'Aosta, which is one of the hardest races for under 23s in Italy. It's 8 days and over 50,000 feet of climbing. And
disgusting.
I finished sixth on this one stage, but it was horrible. Rain, sleet, 5 hours. And it's literally what I learned later on, signing my world tour contract, just the way I raced, which is like very interesting. Of just like, I had no idea people are out there watching. The results on the day seemed less than perfect.
Yeah.
And, but it was the way it was raced. And I think there's like that little moment, like, also teaches you why you act different ways, right? Like how you take on adversity or how you take on racing, right? Whether you're the person to sit in and just wait for it to come to you, or whether you want to race your bike. Both win races at different times, but some get you contracts.
And then you spent a pretty good amount of time in the world tour, right? Like
Only 2 years.
only 2 years.
Yeah.
And then what was your, like, I got to get out of here moment?
It was never an I got to get out of here moment. I signed young. Obviously getting a world tour offer is a pretty crazy thing as an American. So I was 21 years old. It was probably a year early. And I think I just realized over those 2 years that it wasn't worth what I was being paid. It was scary. It was less than safe sometimes. And it was just really freaking hard. Like, I honestly just probably wasn't good enough. And it's something that was like, it felt like it was awesome to make it to there. But then from there, I was like, what's the next step? Like, I always had this, I've talked about this like pipeline above my bed. I like cross things off. USA Cycling used to have this, like, from junior race results, like from regional camps to national team camp to national results to international results, all the way to the world tour. And once I kind of in my head, it crossed all that off. I was like, okay, what do I do next? Like, do you just get a better watts per kilo every year? Like, is that what this is down to? And so, yeah, I think the biggest moment was just like realizing that I wanted to be my own person, and there's not much space for that in world tour cycling unless you're dominant, unless you're the Wout van Aert, the Tom Pidcocks, Matthew Van Der Poels. You're part of a team. You're part of 28 riders, and there's a beauty to that, but it also kind of sucks when you think there's ways that you can do better for a sponsor or ways you can provide value for a team, and it's not seen as that because it's so focused on results.
We actually were just talking about this, where we were talking about how one of the things that we really like about gravel in particular is that you have moved away from like big teams to individuals. So it's like no one knows who got 75th at the Tour of Poland. And that guy is the 75th best cyclist in the world. And now we have this whole gravel's like opened up to this this like smaller audience, but also these like smaller figures who are now getting big. Do you think that like that shift and attention in gravel has been giving a lot of people opportunities to leave the world tour? Because I feel like that's what we're seeing, right? Is not necessarily like where people are like retiring to gravel, but now you have people who have like long careers ahead of them who are deciding to leave, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think people are leaving earlier. Yeah, I think it's due to a couple things. First off, I don't think there was ever a place in the U.S. growing up that you could make money as a cyclist in the U.S. It was always in Europe.
Is there now?
Yes.
And is it gravel?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think first thing is financial value, right? That provides an opportunity or a growth platform for kids, younger kids coming out of high school leagues. I think beyond that, there's also something being created in the US at every race series you go to. I could talk all day about, I think, how race series overlap each other, and it's a struggle sometimes. But fandom is being created in US cycling again. And that's due to social media. That's due to companies getting behind singular athletes, right? Because that makes a big difference. Like my identity with Envy is my identity as a cyclist now. It's not based on a team of 28 riders. You don't see different things. I'm not moving. Like my contract only goes to 2025, but I could sit here right now and tell you I'm going to be an NBA athlete until I'm done. And that's just based on like mutual loyalty or understanding on what the goals are moving forward. You know, things can happen, company could get bought, things could change, and I'm sitting here lying. But the point of it is that I think you're able to provide this true value and point at either financial success or success as a brand for companies that allow everybody to understand or get excited about why they ride a bike and why what you're doing is exciting to them, and then both do it together at the race, right? Because that's, at the end of the day, the big difference. You can't ride the Tour of Poland with 75th best cyclist in the world unless you somehow convince them and pay them some euros and they go ride the stage with you afterwards. Like, it doesn't happen. And so now you can go do, you know, whether it's a Belgian Welf ride in California that's a, you know, a road gravel race, or a Unbound 200 in Emporia, Kansas, and somebody can meet you in January while you're doing a training camp in Tucson, hear about a race you're doing, show up and do the ride with you. They might not finish with you, but they're going to start on that same start line. And that is a game changer.
Yeah. So you think it's like access is why gravel is so successful. Because, I mean, people have been talking about like American road cycling is on the decline. There's a race called Joe Martin, which is like Joe Martin went away. Maybe it'll come back. Do you think that like really just like it's social media and access and funding that is like what's setting gravel apart?
It's definitely funding, right? That's just the way anybody goes. Growing up or even now, I don't think gravel bikes are the coolest bikes in the world. I'd rather ride a hardtail, I'd rather ride a road bike. But it's a space where we're getting away from cars. It's a little more safe. It's cheaper for races to happen because you can do them on open roads with less cars most of the time. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that US racing is always going to have is the insurances, right? You can go race in Belgium for €5. And
Can't do that here.
Can't do that. Like, yeah, name a race that, like, you know, people could do a race that, like, they lose money on. It's like more of a Gran Fondo or a fun thing. But, like, everything in the US is always, it's always a trade. It's okay, I'm paying $260 for this race. Am I getting a meal? Am I getting a medal? What am I getting, right?
How many t-shirts are in this bag?
Yeah. In Europe, I never got a t-shirt, right? You know, you go to a race, you race your bike, you eat some dried fish, and you go home. Like, that's it. There's nothing more.
We only paid $5 for it.
Yeah. No, but it's like there's a whole theme around it, right? The towns get around it, and they create the race and the experience. And there's betting boards, and you're like, this can't be legal. They're betting on 16-year-olds. But somehow, someone makes money, and I'm stoked because I race my bike for cheap. And
I do own critbets.com, so yeah.
It gets growing. And like Lifetime's doing their whole fantasy thing this year we have this series called Lifetime Grand Prix, you know, that they're trying to do this pick a top 5 male and female riders. And I think it's interesting, but like it all has to go further, right? But it's definitely on its way. It's the first time that I've seen in the US that, like you say, there's notoriety, right? Like I get noticed at a race, whether it's for my dog or for the racer that I am randomly.
I have an interesting one for you, actually. So coming from like the World Tour platform, right? You're saying, the pay wasn't there and things like that. And so now you're coming into this gravel space that we've been talking about for a few minutes. And the general idea there is that there is money in that sport right now, but it's still up to you to go out and grab it in some way. So I guess my question for you, because what I've seen a lot of, at least from my perspective, athletes a lot of the time don't know how to market themselves, and not a lot of folks are just going to come knocking on your door and be like, hey man, we'd like to package you into this particular athlete and then sell you to these particular brands and then pay your way to do your thing that you love doing, which is racing your bicycle full time all year long and make it livable. So I guess from your perspective, and you're a pretty creative dude as well, and we have a creative entourage in the corner that you can't see.
They're off camera.
They're off camera. But how would you advise younger athletes, especially coming up, that want to make this a full-time gig for themselves, beyond being a World Tour pro? How would you say that they market or package themselves to essentially sell to brands and make a living? Because you're essentially becoming an entrepreneur and a marketer and a bike racer all in one.
Yeah. There's two ways. One, you're Keegan or Sophia and you dominate everything. That works.
That's the easy way.
Yeah, that's everyone can do that one.
Easy or the hard way. Second is you learn. You get shot down a lot. You have elevator pitches. You learn what it is to pitch a company and talk to people and have communications and honestly figure out how you actually provide value to the company or the person you're working with. I always go back to the story, so it's probably been on many podcasts by now, but coming out of the road, and I want to preface, like, the road had a lot of money, still has more money than gravel. I was meant the road in the U.S. The road in the U.S. has not ever had that much money, in my opinion. But coming out of the road, I felt quite stupid for not going to school. I got to this point and I was like, okay, now what do I do next? And was trying to figure out how to do this. And I was, I had friends connecting with people, and coming out of Michigan, I really wanted to talk to Carhartt. So I connected with a woman, still works there, still a good friend. And I'm all excited. I got my notes. I had the phone call set up and ready for this pitch. And we get on, and the first 5 or 6 minutes, I give her my spiel, right? I'm like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it. This is how much money I want. Like everything, right? First 10 minutes. And she literally pretty much goes, oh, honey, this is horrible. And it was honestly such a now pivotal moment for me, because it made me realize, and to preface that, she had come from selling sponsorships for MLB, NBA, NHL teams. So she'd been in my shoes for bigger corporations. It made me realize that a pitch is only worth what value you actually add. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to tell a company why you can do something, you have to actually believe it. And that's not easy to do, right? If you're a singular person and you're telling Envy you're going to sell bikes, how are you going to sell bikes? It's not as simple as pointing at a code, because very few people can actually work codes. They don't work. When someone goes and buys a $12,000 bike, they're not looking for a code that's just quantifying that an athlete's
4% discount.
And so it's trying to, I think, have brands mesh together. And so I guess my best advice to younger athletes is always just like, every single time you're at a race, meet people, have conversations, ask them questions. If you can figure out how to answer their frequently asked questions for their customer service, you're probably going to be an athlete for life with that company. Not always easy, but how do you figure out how to make their lives easier? And then from there, you can build your relationship further, whether it's financial or whether it's, anything else you want to build. I think the hardest part is just finding the companies you want to work with, because it's easy to point and say, I want to work with Trek. I want to work with Specialized, because you see them on TV or on social media.
Yeah.
But you don't actually know how you can work with those companies until you have that conversation.
Do
you want to jump out?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Sure.
That's-
You gonna talk shit about me now?
Yeah, for sure. We were waiting for you to go.
You can talk about
We acknowledge your guys' existence, so now we gotta let you go.
Yeah, we broke the fourth wall.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
All right, now we can commence the trash talk.
Yeah,
Now that they're gone.
we can really
Now
get into
that they're
this.
gone. Dude, I guess, resetting here, I should say a huge freaking thank you that you're even sitting down with us right now. Second at that race we were talking about, BWR today, the Belgian Waffle Ride, which is a 120 mile, 10,000 feet of climbing, 40% gravel race. So this dude is smoked, people. At least I'm assuming, unless it was lightweight for him. But
I had a lot of candy. I'm back alive.
Oh, there you go.
Somewhat alive.
You were just out keeping the chain tight today?
Yeah, just getting ready.
cruising.
Getting ready for what?
I don't know. Sleep.
Yeah. So Michigan, freezing ass cold. How do you end up in a sport that requires you to be outside a lot? At least I'm assuming it's.
Yeah.
freezing. Tell me about Michigan. What's
I
your
love
perception?
Michigan.
Oh, really?
I loved growing up in Michigan. I think Michigan creates tough people with character.
Cool.
I grew up riding single speed in the winter, right? Like you're saying, it's cold, but you just go out and ride your bike. And I think it's a mindset that in individualistic team sports, as cycling can be, you need to be able to compartmentalize yourself and figure out why you're doing something at a given time. It's not just the suffering. It's kind of just like, it's figuring out who you are, which I think identity can be an interesting thing, but especially when you're involved in sports, it's easy to look at social media or look at results and have that be the defining feature of your year or your month or your start of your season. But the reality is, like, it takes one moment to change your entire perception. And so I think a lot of those like character building rides where you think about that stuff, where you're kind of alone. There isn't a big junior contingent in Michigan. I had a couple of friends, but you go ride your bike. And
How would you say you disconnect from things like the results and whatnot defining you? Where do you find your identity? I mean, you said you have a lot of time to ruminate and think about those things when you're out riding solo, but this kind of goes back to that human psychology interest that you have, right?
Yeah.
So is there a basis in that you found that can sort of direct you to, finding that identity and realizing that you are more than X result?
I can't pinpoint why. I think it's why I'm interested in human psychology, but for me, the glass is always half full. Whatever happens, you fix it. Solution, problem. Sometimes it's not immediately apparent, but I've always been able to very easily compartmentalize things and say, okay, this is what's happening here. This is what has to happen because I want to do this. It comes down to where I put priorities, I think. And that's become a lot of women as a privateer, being able to choose my schedule now. I would say if you ask any of my peers, I overdo everything. I'm on my feet way too long. I do way too much. And I wouldn't disagree. I literally had envy force me to get a mechanic because my first two Leadvilles, I was up until 1 a.m. getting my bike ready. Because I just was doing shit up until I was like, oh, I have to race tomorrow at 6.
Probably get 3 hours of sleep. Yeah.
But I love that. To me, it's just a compartmentalization thing of I know I can do what I have to do at 6 a.m. the next morning when race start hits. It might not be the most optimal version of it, but I set these priorities of I also want to be this person. I want to inspire people. I want to be a part of the community. It's why I left the road, right? It's gravel cycling is so much more accessible. I want to be that accessible part. And I don't know where that balance point is, but until you find it, it's just worth searching for. And so that's constantly what I'm doing is how much is too much on my plate to still validate myself as a professional cyclist and have me be valuable to companies, but also be helpful to other people coming into the sport or in the sport or who are coming to the race to experience what it's like. And having a cute dog helps.
We've had 2 back-to-back wiener dog influencers on the show.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, we had
A lot
Laurel.
of wiener energy going on around here.
oh, Laurel was on.
Laurel was
Yeah,
on
Laurel.
last week. Yeah. Do you guys ever
We
talk?
talk all about it all the time.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
I figured there had to be the wiener dog connection.
Yeah. And even when Laurel and I don't talk about it, Adam sends me pictures. It's a whole thing.
We're gonna put another photo of Adam right here. We had in the last episode we have like
It's a pretty good one.
we had an Adam cam. Yeah.
That's good.
I just used the first one I found and it came up on Google. So you can imagine what that looks like. Yeah.
Going back to like the like chasing results thing, I feel like there's like a complaint now that a lot of people are like, oh, well, results don't matter. Everything's about social media these days. Where do you stand on that?
I'll go back to the Keegan and Sophia thing first. If you can beat them and dominate, results matter. They make a great living.
Yeah.
I think the point of that is there can pretty much only be one of those people at a given time if there is a dominant rider. And so when I talked to, like I started a project this year called Phase 2, which is focused on development riders. And the whole conversation for me is that you're not going to win, most likely, for your first 2, 3, 5 years in this sport.
Maybe forever.
Yeah.
You may never win.
And that is something that it doesn't mean you can't have a career in this sport, but you have to constantly evaluate where your value is to a company. And so beyond the outliers who are winning consistently, I think the balance is very much personal, right? Who are you? Do you like talking to people? Great. What's your personality, right? Is it, keep going back to it, but is it dogs? Is it mustaches? Is it the fact that you're 6'7" and you're South African and you can do 800 watts for 27 minutes?
Never heard of him.
Don't know him.
Seems personal.
That's Matt Beers. He won Belgian Wolf Ride today.
We're not salty about it.
No, but I think there's a balance. I don't know where it sits. I think from my personal perspective, I work with a good friend from Michigan, Avery Stum, and we've decided we wanted to do content. And one of the most interesting things I ever heard when I first said I wanted to do some YouTube videos was someone told me, picture the exact person you want to watch this video and build it around them. That's how you edit it, right? And so I've always just chosen my grandmother. My grandmother started riding bikes at like 65 years old and like loved it, is like the inspiration in the Memphis riding community. And like, that's why I want to make content, right? I think it hopefully connects with people who are more competitive and more intense, but I want it to be playful enough that every single person can be like, oh, look at rub his dog's tummy. Okay, now he's sleeping. Okay, now he's shoveling rice into his face. And like all of those things come together where you can find the nitpicky questions. Okay, how much does your bike weigh? How much did you eat today? Did you eat carbs? But then also the like normal everyday life questions like, oh, he's changing his gears the night before the race. Oh, he's going to bed a little late. He's only gonna get 5 hours sleep today. Like all those little things that add up that we all go through, whether it's a marathon or a bike race, but it's not always shown, right? And like everyone talks about that. The behind the scenes is interesting, but I truly believe it is, right? And that having a friend who like, I don't pay Avery hourly, right? He's a good friend who wanted to start doing things with me. We share a bed half the season, right? And that makes it so close that it's just fun, right? He's like, one of my favorite videos is our first Belgian waffle ride when I won. We did this as 2022, did a video. And mid-race, I missed a feed that someone else was supposed to be giving me. And Avery makes this gut decision, had never fed a bottle in his life, to go to the far end of the course to get me a bottle. And he like set his phone up. So it's a super shitty video, but he's like freaking out and like hobbling on the side of the road, shaking. You can see him in the video shaking and like holding the bottle out. And he comes running like, yes. And I was like, obviously I won. That's the climax of the video. But it's just like, how do you bring together this awesome community and just share that? Because that's true connection, right? And that's, I think, what I try to put forward with the companies I work with, to get back to your actual question, is that I want to find that brand-to-brand collaboration and not just be Alexi, the sponsored athlete, because that's going to be a set number of years, right? How are you valuable enough that at the end of your reign as a competitive cyclist, they still want to pay you to be the person you are, representing the brand, even if you aren't winning every day.
And you touched on this a little bit. I want to like go back to it. You work with a development program, right?
Yes. I don't know how much. Yeah, how much do you want me to talk about it?
A lot.
Yeah, I'm
ideally,
actually, this is really interesting.
Well, I think the
can get
follow up
water
of it
first.
is you and I have kind of, or not. I've talked about it with Dalton. You've talked about it a little bit, where we feel like the pipeline is not super functional
At all.
for anyone. And so I think that like what's cool is there's a lot of alternative pipelines that are now opening up. And so I want to like hear about this development program that do you work with them? Do you run it? Is it your thing?
Yeah. I guess I'll start it from the beginning. I had a kid who won the Utah High School League reach out to Envy and ask if next time I was in Ogden, I could possibly meet him for 20 minutes for coffee, which is awesome, right? And we met, and his question was, I don't know what I want to do now. Should I be a cyclocross racer or a mountain biker? And I was like, what? Those are not your options. Wait, what? And it started this kind of thought in my head of like, I've always believed the current series that is the premier series in the US right now, the Lifetime Grand Prix, is not sustainable for a young rider, say someone coming out of a high school league, 18 to 23. And so the original goal was I'm going to convince Lifetime to create a baby Grand Prix. The year was too tight. There wasn't enough time at the end of last year, but I turned it and said, okay, I'm going to convince Envy, and Envy was super on board to carry 2 riders, male and female next year, but in that age bracket, 18 to 23, to 3 of the Lifetime Grand Prix races to hopefully begin to educate my partners on why they should be looking at younger talent as well as young riders, right? And hopefully throughout that process, I can convince my peers to go to their companies and everyone starts carrying younger riders. And that's pretty dang simple and is not a big financial burden on anybody. I think at the end of the day, like to make it super simple, I got really sick of everyone pointing fingers and saying it's USA Cycling's fault or it's Lifetime's fault or it's Specialized's fault or anyone random's fault that there's not development. It's not. We can all do it.
It's our fault.
Yeah, it's all of our fault. It's really simple to sit down and take time, and that kid coming up to you while you're pre-riding is 20 times more important than your bicycle race.
Yeah.
That's hard in that moment to realize that. But the minute you do, first off, you become the valuable athlete you're supposed to be. But secondly, you just created the connection that person actually wants to continue riding a bike, right? And that can be taken way beyond that age bracket I'm talking about, right? Like you can take that to someone who flatted on the side of the Belgian Wolf Ride course who was doing her first race and her husband packed her saddlebag and he put a Schrader valve in instead of a Presta valve and doesn't fit in her wheel, right? And she's either going to never ride a bike again or someone stops and helps her and she carries that on and gives it to somebody else. Those moments, I think that all of us, it's very easy to speed past. That's, I think, why I wanted to be a part of starting a development program. I wasn't like, I need more on my plate. This is a great idea. It very much was, I got really sick of everyone pointing fingers. I thought I could make an impact. Envy was on board, which is awesome. And so that's kind of what we did. We called it phase 2. We opened it up to applications early in the year. And they're going to Unbound 100, because I think the 200 is way too long for someone in that age. Crusher and the Tusher, where they get to race the top pro men and women, and then Big Sugar 50. And so hopefully throughout those races, they get a chance to kind of be wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, see a big expo at Unbound, see a massive race, go to Tusher and realize like, a little bit of get their butt kicked. Like you're at altitude, it's a really hard race, but it's under 100 miles. You can suffer through it. Then go to Big Sugar 50 and hopefully have learned, get a result, feel well. And throughout this, learn to talk to sponsors, have conversations, right? Because they're theoretically sponsored athletes now, right? Yeah. It's definitely through me, but I made the connection and handed off and like, okay, now you have your conversation with Wahoo. Now you have your conversation with Pearl Izumi. And, 2 athletes doesn't make a difference, but if I can convince Keegan and Sarah Sturm to carry athletes, all of a sudden it starts to. And then if you get Lifetime to be involved, I think the big deal of this is without a financial burden, you can create a whole development group behind the Grand Prix that really elevates the sport very quickly.
kind of what I was going to ask specifically is, how do you think, I say we, that's definitely not even remotely fair. You and your colleagues of professional athletes can, I guess, be held accountable to sort of lean into that development of it. There needs to be, I feel like having some accountability there or taking personal responsibility would be very valuable. How is it that you feel fellow athletes could do so? Hold themselves accountable, be held accountable by brands, or become personally responsible for taking that on and carrying that torch?
Answering that's kind of tough because I think I also sit here from a place of not everyone in our Grand Prix or in the US racing gravel makes money, right? And that delineation is a big deal. It's also the reason I think a development program is super important. I think there should be a harsher split in the Grand Prix. I think right now it becomes unfair for people at the back end who don't have the support or the cash to get to races, to be there on time, to have people in the feed zone. And so I think it is on the people who have influence over the companies they work with to influence those companies positively and have them to look at other people, right? That was one of the first conversations I had with one of the companies that I brought into phase 2 was like, this isn't about you supporting a project I'm doing. This is about you realizing you're missing the crop of athletes that matters. For the next 3 to 5 years, I would tell you that myself, Russell, Cole, Keegan are going to dominate. Is that
what happens
after that? Yeah. Exactly. And I think in that moment, if you can convince them to look at that, right? And even if it's not a paid contract, even if it's $1,000 or here or there, housing at Unbound, right? Little things that are very hard to come by. It makes a massive impact for people, especially people who are trying to make a stand or get involved, and also convinces people they don't have to race the biggest, hardest races every single time, right? Like race your local crit, race your something closer to you. You don't have to do all these races that are the easiest, biggest races you see online, right? Whether it's Unbound or Big Sugar or Belgian Waffle Ride. Those are awesome. Go to a couple because they're going to light your fire, but you're probably not going to get the result you want. You're going to complain and say you have a bad day, or you're going to flat, you're going to have mechanical. That's part of the race. That's part of the course. And I think it's being able to kind of take that in and have a learning experience come from it is where things change. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the day, I can point at the male and female side, 5 to 7 people on both that have enough influence over their companies to hopefully put the extra little bit of time in to do half their pre-ride with a younger kid, right? Like the onus is on the companies to truly do the support. So once their bikes are built and they have clothes, all you got to do is, just help. And I think that's not very hard for people. And honestly, it'd probably make riders race a lot better, because if you take your mind off your own race for a minute, you probably realize that bike racing is just bike racing.
I think that one of the things that's hard with like development is that like for ball sports, it's like, oh, well, you play football in high school, and then hopefully you play football in college, and then you play in the NFL. And we have NICA, right? Which is the North American Interscholastic Cycling Association.
That sounded great. We're going to go with that.
Yeah, I like it.
But do you think that there's like a way that you could rope? NICA is like a mountain bike racing organization, right?
Yes.
Is there a way that like you think NICA could get roped into this somehow, where there becomes like a more clear, like, oh, well, you raced NICA in high school, and then, if you're good enough, you get picked up by this program, and then, maybe we like pass people up the ladder. Do you think that like creating that like ball sports type of funnel for especially like off-road cycling would work?
Possibly. It's hard for me to say because I didn't grow up in the NICA era, right? Like I grew up where there was on the road, a lot more support post high school. And so like, if I knew if I made it to 18 and was good enough in that funnel, I would get picked up by an under 23 team, whether it be Livestrong or BMC or Hincapie or UHC at the time. And so from there, that was the point of like inflection of like, okay, you can make this a career or you can't, whether it's $30,000 or world tour or figuring out where you exist, how much you love racing bikes. Now there's a lot more kids in bikes from 14 to 18, but there's nothing after 18. And that is the fall off point, right? And what's hard is you can watch the World Cups and those are incredible, but that is the mountain bike World Cups. Sorry. You can watch mountain bike World Cups and that is a theoretically the closest comparison pathway from NICA, but that is unbelievably hard to get to. I think we've had 2 Americans go up to under 23 racing in the last 2 years. And so I think what it comes down to is yes, but how do you have to base it around something. And that's why to me, it's like Baby Grand Prix seems like the focal point, right? Where you can have all of the races we go to, there are smaller versions of, and there's the same point system for riders. And, the winner, the female male winners get their first spot into the Grand Prix, right? And that's that pathway or pipeline. I think what's hard is convincing people who have been introduced to mountain bikes to pick up a curly bar bike and think that's also cool, because there is a big difference, right? I have always struggled with this because I think you can compare cycling to skiing to golf very simply, just in the sense of like you play it in high school now with NICA. There's a lot of people on bikes, but they get off bikes when they get a car and they usually don't get on bikes again. And if they do, they stay on bikes the rest of their life. And so I think our biggest issue with cycling is it's so split. Downhill is so different from track riding. Track riding is so different from gravel riding. And everyone has their identity and those are the only people they watch. If you ask someone who's a massive fan of downhill and watches every downhill event, they won't know anything about US gravel racing. And that disconnect, I don't know how you ever connect that, but that's what's missing. And that's not fixable even in the Lifetime Grand Prix, right? That's a endurance mountain bike and gravel event series.
Yeah. I feel like Lifetime's doing I mean, the thing that's always hard is that trying to explain like skin suits to downhill people is
fun,
challenging to say the least. But I think that Lifetime is doing something kind of interesting because not all of the Lifetime stuff is gravel, isn't it? Isn't some of it mountain bikes?
Yeah, we have 3 mountain bike races. 3
mountain bike races. So I think that's like interesting. Mm-hmm. Like that's at least an attempt to, I think, bridge some of that gap. I think that like, are you going to capture the people who are like the enduro racers and the downhill people? Like maybe a couple of them, but
yeah, it's possible. I mean, I've only nothing but high praise for Lifetime. Like it's why I make a living in the sport. It's why I'm still racing a bike. It's what it changed is that on 7 weekends throughout the year, every single best cyclist in the nation and slightly now the world who races endurance, gravel, off-road, mountain biking is there, right? You go to Unbound, it is the best of the best. Every year it gets faster. Sea Otter, the same thing. For so many years that changed where everyone split up in different places. And as much as I struggle with it just being one series taking over, right? Like I want there to be Belgian Waffle Rides. I want there to be Epic Rides, mountain bike series. But the validation factor of being able to compare yourself to another 30 guys all year is how you can get paid, right? Because companies can value people based on a standing. And so that quantification that has never existed in cycling and goes back to like, oh, what's your social media stats? How many races have you won? Let me see your resume. Now it's less unquantifiable, right? It's as that fandom grows, I have people send me the MV bikes they build up. And it's like, wait, this is cool. Now I can just send this to my marketing manager, right? And like, it doesn't have to be much, right? You start selling bikes, you prove things, and like, it's very simple to see the quantification. One of my favorite parts of working with companies is it's truly you're just trying to build a personality, right? Who are you with that company? And as these series grow, that's, I think what's exciting to me is like, you get to be a part of that, right? Like every time I come back to Belgian Waffle Ride, after having won it, my identity here is that year. And then I have to try to be that year, right? I have to always try to make it happen again. And even if it never does, I'll always, like every time I'm back here, I think of that year, right? And the moments, the things that happened, the way things happened, the day it was. And it's, those little moments that are, I think the reason all these series exist. It's just about trying to fit them all into a
So
season.
this 18 to 23-year-old time frame that you're sort of pointing to as a really key point in the developmental time frame of riders, right? And it's sort of like the what do you do? You obviously had, and you're speaking here from personal experience. You said you got the World Tour contract very young, obviously, but at the same time, 18 to 23 is a really pivotal window. Like you said, you ended up not going to college and pursuing medicine, things like that. I would imagine a lot of athletes' parents probably wouldn't be in love with this idea unless, especially with no clear outlet or place to go. So you being before this sort of, lifetime series, this development stuff that you're working on and everything else, or NICA, being before that era, did you have a hard time convincing the people around you, your parents, your family, people in the community? A lot of people see an athlete pursuing a dream like that, and in a lot of ball sports, NFL, whatever, people are like, oh yeah, rad, this dude's going to the NFL, sick. This dude is trying to pursue cycling in Europe. People don't really understand what that means. So what does your community / parents / family, everybody else have to say about that, and how'd you navigate it?
It was honestly pretty simple. I think also like cycling, if you're in it, your parents are probably investing money into it.
Okay.
Right? That helps. They've seen your growth or lack thereof, your discipline. I also think I was born in 94, so 29. I think our generation, college changed a lot, right? Like if you, at least my parents, if you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do in school, why go pay for school? And so I think I came to my parents with something I wanted to do. We set boundaries on it. Hey, if I have an under 23 contract of any kind, of any pay, can I try this? We'll apply to schools. We'll defer, right? It's not like a giving up on something. And then from there, I'll defer and defer and defer, or go to school if I don't get a contract or don't sign World Tour within my 4 years of my under 23 career. And I think that kind of the goal setting timelines was what convinced my parents is the right choice, right? Because that's, I think what they wanted to teach me, right? Is that like, go after whatever the goal is, but also have contingencies, have plans for when things don't go your way, because they don't always go your way. Cycling is a testament to that, right? There's multiple, there's little moments that add up and end up being more than you think they are at the moment. But there's also these times that it could easily go the other way. And then I go to school and never raced a bike again. I would have ridden a bike, right? But then it's over. And so I think I don't really have a great answer, but it's a lot of just the conversation, right? And knowing what you are, I think and trying to find, saying it nicely, when you're delusional and when you're not. I think you know a little bit.
Yeah, you got to understand.
I think it's also as the sport is, I think the sport is in a period of growth right now. I think cycling is growing. Is that it is also, I think, becoming less delusional also. I think that now, like kids being like, oh, I'm going to go race the tour is like, maybe that's still delusional. But I think that like the idea that, someone who's like 18 or 19 who has a solid background in cycling to be like, hey, I'm going to go pay my bills racing my bike in some capacity is not that crazy.
And you also do it and go to school now.
Yeah.
Especially, right? Like, especially with being able to do online school or community college and still train. Like, I think when racing was all in Europe, that was really tough. Now with this opening of the accessibility of racing in the US, it really makes it, you don't have to like go to a cycling specific college that has cycling as a varsity sport just to race, right? You can go to any school. You can go to CU Boulder, you can go to University of Michigan and race your bike on the side because it's all in the same place. You just got to be good at time management.
Yeah. Do you think that having a definitive pull from multiple areas in your life distracts you from the centric goal of being able to be a professional athlete, right? So in your experience, has you been like just, sole focus, professional athletics, right? Being a professional cyclist. Do you think that that's allowed you or offered you some sort of, I don't want to say advantage because that's not the right word, but do you think that that focus is what will propel you to that point? Or do you think that people can do that and still be multifaceted and say, go to school, right? But still be pursuing professional cycling or whatever sport they're in? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Might have just been
Can
convoluted.
you do both? Yeah, I think that's
Yeah. You have to set a priority,
yeah.
right? Like, I'll use our phase 2 athlete. So Neruda is our male phase 2 athlete. He got chosen. He's going to CU Boulder. I'm sure that conversation with his parents was eye-opening, right? But he also had told them he wanted to race a bike, right? It's what he wants to do. And so I think that there has been in the last 2 months since he was chosen a shift of where his priorities lie. And that's a conversation with his parents too, because they're helping fund his college degree. But at the end of the day, there's a set amount of time you have to become an athlete, a professional athlete. And so I think people view that as like follow your dreams, which I think is like, it's very true, as much as it's cliched. And it's, I think just once again, finding that balance point of, okay, my priority is cycling right now. And these next 2 years, I'm going to dedicate this, but I also have to get through school enough that if cycling doesn't work out in 2 years, I can focus on school for the last 2 years and still get my degree, and setting these little benchmarks or check marks. And so I think it's possible, but I think you do have to have a priority.
Are your brothers still athletes?
I mean, they're both still athletic.
Okay. That's other.
I was very mean growing up. Not really. I needed to dominate everything, so I kind of pushed them out of every sport. But no, they're both great at hockey and cycling. To be honest, they both just went different directions. My middle brother is insane with his hands and is an aerospace welder. And then my youngest brother just graduated college and he's brewing beer right now with his chemistry degree.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I love that's like a thing now.
Yeah.
It used to just be like, you used to just be like the weird guy who brewed beer. And now you can get a degree in it. Yeah. And it's,
My parents lucked out too. I didn't go to school. My middle brother went to community college for a trade. And my youngest brother went in Canada. So it was $2,500 a semester.
Yeah, they were like,
whoa, what?
Yeah.
Tell me about the Canadian college system, my dude.
We're dual citizens. So as a Canadian, going to school is super cheap.
Being a dual citizen, did that, do you think that had any influence on your upbringing? And if so, in what ways? I think Canada, US is just like pretty close up there in the north too, right?
I don't think being a dual citizen had much.
Okay.
My grandfather got me probably is the one that got me into cycling. He raced in Holland and then immigrated after World War II to Canada. I think culture has always been involved in my family a lot, like realizing that like you're one of many. And so it's, that came into play at different times, but I don't think being a dual citizen changed much. I think it was more just
the opportunity to go to school very cheap.
Yeah. Like little things, right? Like, oh, we're going to Canada for 2 weeks in the summer, like random things. And, we didn't just stick around Michigan, but based on bike races that are going to visit family, we were driving all around, which I think is, it was fun as a.
Do you have an affinity toward nature? I feel like people from the north, man, that's like a thing. Like I mean, I don't know. I love that, but you guys get trees. Yeah. I don't get that. You get palm trees.
I definitely do. I like it. Even my girlfriend and I moved to Boulder in July of 2020, and as much as I like Colorado, it's too perfect, man.
Yeah.
Like somehow I get angry when it's one gray day, and you're like, wait, why?
You would not make it in San Diego.
Yeah, we get May gray, June gloom.
Ooh. No, I live like you're in the Midwest, right? Whether it's upstate New York or in Michigan. I guess New York is east, but like you're in that side of the country, and it's like this perfection for a month and a half in June, July, right? And the rest of it you get through.
You endure for a
your life.
Just dealing with it.
And I like there's a beauty to that.
Yeah, I used to live in Seattle. So it was like the same thing where it's like 9 months of the year you were like depressed, you were miserable, And then like June 1st comes around and like it's the first day where it's like 70 degrees. There's no clouds. And you're like, oh, like you hear the birds sing. It's like, the single ray of sun touches your face and you're like, oh, like nothing hurts anymore.
Yeah.
So what are you doing in Boulder aside from riding your bike all the time? Like what's your activity of choice? Hang out with Willie all the time, but
that's pretty much it. I mean, I've as a privateer, you do everything. So my time gets taken up. I
travel a ton, right?
Yeah, I fit 56 flights last year.
Whoa. Yeah. What airline?
Gave United a lot of money.
Yeah, United? Ooh.
United sponsor this man.
It's
Come
okay.
on.
It's been 1K for 2 years. I'll take it.
Wow.
I am an absolute points whore.
A lot of lounge time.
I love the loyalty programs. No, I've enjoyed the learning process that is being a privateer racer, right? It is all based around cycling, but I started this phase 2 development program. Since COVID with a friend, we started this path to Leadville. Now it's path to Steamboat, but called From the Ground Up. Focuses on getting people into the sport, interested in taking on a race, and trying to focus on education and inclusion through sport.
Is that primarily in Boulder or is it like global
That's all
US?
all over the U.S.
Right on.
So we're in our 4th season with that, and then my own racing. And I don't believe in having an agent, so it's accounting, it's talking with companies, it's figuring out race schedule, it's booking logistics, it's making content with Avery. I'm good at keeping myself busy.
It's a 24-hour job. It's not the standard 9 to 5.
No, but I love that, right? I know even right now, I already see that there's a clock on it. Like I love it, but I know when I start a family, it's going to be Alexi goes riding for fun.
What do those goals look like from the family perspective? Are you going to like tote the kid
I'm
around in the trailer?
I'm going to have 3 boys.
Yeah? You're already set on it?
The baby goes on the back and then the dog goes on the baby.
Yeah.
No, I just think my point is, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I look at a bunch of my peers right now and I want to be able to experience everything. Like I remember growing up with my parents or growing up with my brothers and like being more educated than my brothers than my parents. And I want that to be the case, right? And so that means being around and being able to create the boundaries around that. And so I have goals I want to kind of finish off in cycling. But at the same time, I never thought I would race my bike as long as I have. Never had a real job. Never owned a car. Never, like all these weird things that like are going to happen at some point here. And
the minivan.
Yeah. And so I think it's just like, it's exciting, but also like it's a weird place to be in where you're like half in, half out. Like I've gone from that place of feeling stupid for not going to college to being like, holy shit, I can do a lot of different things now. Just based on learning how to do things, based on the connections you gain through talking to a bunch of random companies. And so now I'm no longer worried about what I'm going to do. It's more just when. And it's such the unknown's exciting, but also like it's going to be such a grand shift, I think, for me. It's not going to be like cold turkey, no race anymore, but it's going to be very much like, I don't think I'll continue racing Leadville unbound Belgian waffle ride. Right?
It takes training to do that, right?
Yeah. I don't need to know how much how much fitness I can lose in a year.
You're gonna go race a local mountain bike series and just dunk on people.
Or just have fun. I don't know. Like I don't know how to do it, but just make content with Avery. I don't know. Like
what are some of those cycling goals?
The lofty one that is a struggle to say, but going after the TT spot in the Olympics. This coming up in 3 weeks here. TT, the time trial spot on the line. McNulty is not coming back, I heard of, as a week, so that is even more lofty at this point. And I think I, at some point, want to give every one of these races in the U.S. one really good go. Like, to me, Leadville last year was probably the best go I'll ever have with Keegan there. Like, I didn't grow up at altitude. Keegan's spectacular. Like, finishing second was awesome, but by 25 minutes, we're in different zip codes.
He's such a specimen.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
And it's not demoralizing to me. It's more just like, that was my day. I raced well.
Cool.
That's it.
Put him in his own category.
Yeah.
Like,
and so it's moving on. Like, I feel like I've done what I need to at Belgian Waffle Ride. I'll keep coming back until I'm done racing, but I've been satisfied here. I want the day I want to have it unbound and be done with that race. I haven't had that. I'd love to win the Grand Prix, but it's not like a need. And I'd love to kick this baby Grand Prix off. I'd love to like truly be a part of starting the development program that builds beyond me.
If you didn't check these boxes, how would you feel with your impact on the sport currently?
As of the last 2 years, great. I think privateer racing gives you the ability to truly focus on what you want to focus on. And it's been hard at times, but I've really every single moment, like I think, all those super motivational videos are like, you
David
get
Goggins.
up, you get up, you work hard, set my alarm at 3 a.m.
They don't know me, son.
I feel like I've done that with U.S. cycling fans, right? There's not one moment I feel like I've turned down somebody or done something that I regret. It's always been everything else beyond. I think it's been easy for me because I came from the very more competitive side of road cycling, whereas ego driven, to like the minute I left that, I kind of left my ego at the door and I race my bike as hard as I can on the day, but everything else is about being out there with people and what endurance gravel US racing is about. The last 2 years, I've been very proud of the human I've become.
You've like hinted at it. Do you have like an exit strategy?
No, I've gone through so many different little things that I've been through. Like, oh, I want to go into venture capitalism. Oh, I want to go into marketing. Oh, I want to stay in cycling. Oh, I don't want to stay in cycling. I think the biggest thing for me is that I realized that like I love pitching. I love finding ways to truly add value, which is like an easy thing to say. It's a very hard thing to do. And like the nice part of learning of this is like I've done this for myself and I've done this for like projects now. And it's fun when you get to do that for something that you can then quantify value 6, 8, 10 months later. And I think I love that from either like giving creativity or giving creative direction from a brand side or from being the person who helps kind of create it from the athlete side of like, what are athletes doing? Like Avery and I have constantly talked about like content in the US racing scene is so focused on recaps that very typically it always jumps over the actual story of like, we're all friends. We all like, there's a picture of like Russell and I is at the top of the Grand Prix too, on the start line of Sea Otter, which is probably the most stressful event of all year because everyone's like, oh, how's everyone doing? And he just like stole my Wahoo. And it's me blaming Keegan for stealing my Wahoo and then Russell holding my Wahoo in front of me on the other side. And it's like, I wish I could show everybody that because it's like everything becomes of like, oh, Keegan beat Alexi or like Russell and Cole are racing. We're like, we're all friends. We all text. We all hang out, right? Like that wasn't the case on the road. So it's cool to like bring that back consistently.
Yeah.
I hope that stays the same forever, which it might not as more money comes into the sport, but
yeah. What do you say to, because now this is like, I'm sure you've probably heard about it. You are an ex-World Tour cyclist. What is your defense of gravel racing is becoming the World Tour? Where it was like, what's the status of the spirit of gravel?
Gravel racing will never be the World Tour. And I also I think it's somewhat disrespectful the way I say that, but the reality is, actually I'll rephrase that. Gravel racing will never be the World Tour in my lifetime. Gravel racing has no history, legacy, loyalty. It's an infant. It's been around for 5 years. Maybe there's a point where it starts to have this, it grows enough where, we have a race that's 100 years old and Unbound has something really means something. But right now, especially as a kid who grew up idolizing the road, Liège Bastogne Liège will always be 27 times cooler than Unbound. I don't care what you do. I will always sit down. I will set my alarm. I'll wake up and watch the race. Right. I probably won't do that with Unbound once I stop racing. Maybe I will, but I doubt it. And I think that isn't a knock against gravel racing. The accessibility is the value of it, in my opinion. But I think the comparison is never worth it.
Yeah. No, go for it.
Oh, I was just actually going to kind of deviate topics, but do you have something on this topic?
No.
Oh, entirely different question here. You seem very well educated and well spoken from our conversation here. And my curiosity is surrounding where to not be traditionally educated is probably a semi-controversial topic in America today. And I would like to know where you gain your knowledge. Is it books, traditional print media? Like, where does this come from? Because you're obviously a well-educated dude. You're doing well for yourself. You know how to market and pitch and all these things that you're passionate about. You're also an athlete, but that breadth of knowledge is still very important. So where do you get it?
If you stop talking and listen, you can actually learn.
2 ears, 1 mouth.
I think it just comes from curiosity and wanting to be. I think we all have like an aspirations of like who we want to be, like what we want our identity to be, and that can be based on social media and be not so healthy, or it could be based on something else and be super great. I think for me, it's always been about like, first off, how do I make myself happy, and then from there, what can I positively impact elsewhere? Most of my learning has come from just talking to people. I've never been afraid to ask a question. Sometimes those questions are probably too far and they look at me like you're an idiot, but they usually still answer the question. But I think at the end of the day, it truly is listening more than you talk. Like, it's really easy to be the one that talks too much. And I think as athletes, sometimes it seems like that's what you should do. Like, an air of confidence is what you need around you. I'm always going to be the one to say that's not true, right? If you open your mouth, you better be sure you want it repeated. And if you
Especially with the internet.
Yeah, 100% for sure. And it can define people, especially athletes, when you are searching for that identity. And I think it also helps that like my curiosity of learning is that I haven't with my high school degree being my only degree. From there, it's like, what do you do post-career? You've been so lucky to be able to ride a bike, but there is an end point to this, and you're not going to retire on your bike racing earnings. And so what are you going to do? So maybe there's a fear factor behind it too, of just like, learn while you can, while it's easy, and make a bunch of human connections and relationships that will serve you well.
Pay the bills later.
Time will tell. I haven't gotten there yet.
That's what credit cards are for.
Oh, man. We did talk about tax fraud recently.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. Not with you, but, you know.
Yeah. Our last guest was an accountant.
Yeah.
Oh, you know Laurel.
Yeah.
Laurel's an accountant. That's her day job.
Yeah, she also somehow travels and does her job all the time.
She is like 4 different people.
She's like, I'm in Dubai now.
Yeah.
Sick.
When? Yeah. Yeah. She somehow manages to squeeze 17-hour flights into like 5.5 hours.
Yes.
What does retirement look like for you? You said family.
Yeah.
What else?
I don't really know.
Yeah,
Like,
permanent retirement, my personal thing on retirement is that I feel like we're in the age of no such thing as truly ever retiring completely. How do you feel about that?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my biggest thing is that I never would have said the word retirement until you get to a place where you feel comfortable feeling like you had a career.
Yeah.
And that's really the feeling. You can't
You're
be like,
29 also.
It's not defined by results. It really is a feeling, right? And so I don't know that I ever would have found it in the World Tour, no matter how long I stayed there. Because I yearned the like community side of it as well, not just results. Yeah. Like, even if I had gotten results in the World Tour, and maybe at some point I would have been like, yeah, that's enough. But you're always searching for the next result. Even Matthew Vanderpool doesn't win everything, right? He's always something he can go win. Maybe he proves me wrong.
He'll just keep
He's
winning.
well on his way.
him and Tade.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think retirement for me will look. I hope that I've created something that I can keep being involved in cycling, even doesn't mean me on a bike. I'll keep riding forever, right? I think it's a great way to be healthy. But I also want to find balance off the bike too, and reset those priorities and figure out more to learn.
All right.
I feel like that's a good.
I like it.
Yeah. Do you want to like?
You got stuff you want to plug?
Yeah.
You got all your own content going on. You got your gram.
Yeah,
You got Willie the Wiener. Plug Willie, dude.
Willie has an Instagram that my
Yeah.
girlfriend runs. She gets quite annoyed when people ask me on Willie's account. It's at Sir Willie the Wiener.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know. I just love being on. I love having conversations in person like this. And
It's
so
fun, man. Yeah.
it's I don't like listening to my voice like every single person, but I will listen to this.
Will you listen to this? Yeah, I was about to say.
We seriously appreciate your time because you're sitting here. It's 9 p.m.
like 9,
and
10,
you
yeah.
raced 120 miles earlier today. So I think we could probably let you get some sleep tonight.
Yeah. No, it was perfect. I'm glad it worked out. It's I think that's probably the crowning. How do I say this? I think that's probably the point of all of this, right? Is like that accessibility beyond, right? Like we've all known each other I've seen you screaming at me on Belgian Wealth Ride for 4 years, 3 years,
Something
5
like
years,
that,
4 years.
Yeah.
And like that was literally like, that is seared in my brain. That's all I was like, that's Dalton. Okay. And then I like, so it hits me up on Instagram and like, hey, we're doing a podcast. And I was like, cool, man. I'm coming to San Diego again. And then like this happens, right? Like that doesn't happen in the world tour.
Dude, it is a cool like era we're living in to be able to like reach out to somebody and be like, hey, remember that time I screamed in your face, man? You want to sit down and chat with us about
Life.
your life, dude? Yeah.
No, and also you guys have a great podcast name. That was the one thing I didn't want to ask. I wanted to be on air.
Yeah.
It's good.
Right on. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. Although your podcast is shit, so
Yeah.
name is everything.
Name is.
Name is all of it.
Yeah.
Well, with that, we'll give Max the clap.